A very good morning to you. Trust you're doing well. This is still the AM show. I'm Bernice Abubeidu Lansa. And earlier you heard Benjamin Akako having a conversation on that new breed of mosquito that has been found to be in the country. And so you must just be cautious and take the necessary precautions to prevent yourself from getting infected with malaria. Let's now move to the second leg of our big stories, and we are focusing on the latest poll by Global InfoAnalytics, and it has to do with the president's approval ratings. And thankfully, I've got the man responsible to share with us exactly what they found out, and he's in the person of Musa Dankwa. He's executive director of Global Analytics. I've also got political marketing consultant at the University of Education, Winneba, Mr. Dr. Tutu Buahin. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining the program. So let's set the tone for the conversation, Mr. Dankwa. What exactly did you find out as the cause for the dip in the president's approval ratings?
I think one could attribute that to maybe the tightening of economic situation. We saw in January slight improvement in his approval rating. And I think between that period and now, people feel that things have kind of reversed a bit, but not to the level that we saw in October. So you can see that it's a slight dip in his approval rating from, I think, 59 to 65% disapproval.
But interestingly, a majority of people who associate themselves with the party approved his performance.
Yes, about 58%. But beside the MPP affiliates, every other voting bloc disapproved his performance.
Let me come to you, Dr. Tutu Buahin. What does this mean for you? Is this just a mere, like we say in this country, support somebody just because you identify with them, or you see that this is a true sense of people who are being critical of issues and giving their opinions about it? Kindly unmute for me, please.
Bernice, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to my good friend, Mr. Dankwa, and good morning to viewers too. I think from a start, I would say I'll give thumbs up to Musa for the thorough work that he has done. Obviously, I've gone through what he has done, and from methodology to the analysis, I think he deserves thumbs up. With regards to the question, in terms of the approvals, if we should, take the partisan issues out for now, one thing that gives me some kind of scare with regards to the president's approval rate is the fact that, a bit of, or a large majority of floating voters, those who swing between partisan, voting, disapprove the president's performance rating. And I think that that would be a major scare, to the MPP's campaign going forward. And again, when you put all voter cohorts together, and you still see a drop, in the president's approval rating, then it means that directly or indirectly, it is a loss of confidence in the current administration's performance, and that I think that going forward, it is even more than mere rhetorics, and it is not the issue that anybody within the MPP can take it for granted. And I think that when your performance, is given a low rating or a reduced rating, then obviously it shows that there's so much to be done. I want to believe that if it is someone's or a private business that, let's say, the president has been appointed as the CEO, and workers, customers are, giving that low rating. Obviously, what it means is that management or the board will take a second look at it and probably advise or, as it were, get a replacement.
Right.
And that is where, from a political marketing angle, I believe that the MPP as a party, regardless of who is in charge, should be able to put their heads together and, probably advise the president appropriately, restructure the party strategies going into 2024, and probably, come up with pragmatic policies between now and December 2024, or whenever the election will be conducted in 2024.
Right. So, and so if I get you clearly, for you, the question about those affiliated to the NDC or NPP seemingly just given a thumbs up or not because of who they identify with is neither here nor there, because the floating voters indicate what the general populace may be feeling, right?
Yeah, so my point is that if MPP supporters will give a high approval rate to the president, that is not, a surprise. It rather becomes a misnomer when they give a low rating.
But doesn't that then prove that people are just voting a yes or no because they like the person and not necessarily taking into focus the issues at stake? Doesn't that worry you at this stage in our democracy and development?
So party supporters will always do that. And for me, that is not really a surprise within our context.
I'll ask you to hold on for a minute because I need to clarify something here. I remember the last time we spoke, these are not people you go to verify as card-bearing members, right?
No.
They're people who identify or sympathize with the party. We just needed to set that straight. But it's interesting you speak about the impact on this on the next elections, possibly, because that's where I was going to. And the interesting thing is that in that survey also, there was a question asked about who voters trust to better manage the economic crisis, okay? And in there, even though John Dramani Mahama has a higher percentage, it is a dip of what was recorded in January.
That's correct.
Right? And Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who is also 2 points behind John Dramani Mahama, rather had an increase. So I'm looking at the chart here, and it's interesting for me. I just wanted to break it down a bit to us. So Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia in January scored 15% trust to manage the crisis, and in April he had 17%. John Dramani Mahama in January had 46%, and in April has 43%. What is accounting for the dynamics?
I think it's a lot of factors that are accounting for these dynamics. In particular, the feeling that things are beginning to stabilize with regards to the economy. And we've always said that if the economy is the key battle issue, then the success or failure of the government would depend on how people perceive the economy. And I think people will bear witness that between October to December, and a little part of January, February, there was a bit of, easing of cost rises, petrol prices were stabilizing, and that Bahama tend to benefit from that kind of economic environment. Now, if that gets worse, you also pay the price for it. So we can see the feeding into the polling numbers, the way people are feeling on the ground.
It's very interesting, the play here. For you, Dr. Boahing, so would you necessarily then say that there is a direct correlation, and depending on what the economy looks like, we cannot be too sure who is likely to win the 2024 elections? As he said, if it stays as it is, then the figures we are seeing may persist. But if there's a swift turnaround, then we are likely going to see a much more stiffer competition.
Precisely, because the expectation of people, that is Ghanaians, is that they would need a leader who is in the capacity of managing, our economy, to improve our standards of living. And so it has to do with confidence. It has to do with who gives a better output. So if you look at the drop in JDM's confidence, probably the voter is comparing his past, experience as to regards to what has been achieved within this short period. That is from January to this time. And remember that initially, what has actually promoted the MPP has been, the confidence that the Ghanaian voter had in Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia as one of the best managers of our economy. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see that 2% increase, as Musa had said, that because of some level of price reductions on the market with regards to fuel prices, with regards to foodstuffs and some improvements in the living standards of people. So that probably is bringing the confidence that people have in him back. But we can also not discount, because if you see the appreciation of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, you will see that Kennedy Ohene Japan recorded a 4% increase from 8 to 12, and that is also significant. So the question is, why was he able to achieve that 4%, rating? And obviously, probably because people believe in him. People are looking at his business acumen and the fact that he has been able to manage a lot of businesses, and that people believe that when given the opportunity, he can equally do well. So it's a matter of time. A lot of things can change people's minds. That is voting decisions, voting intentions. And so we're looking forward to an exciting kind of elections in 2024.
It's interesting you've introduced Kennedy Ohene Ejiapong. So let me just move. I wanted to save this for later, but once you've brought him in, let me just deal with this and shelve it. If you just joined us, we are discussing the latest report by Global InfoAnalytics, and we've touched on the approval ratings of President Akufo-Addo. We've spoken about what the survey found out to be who people trust to manage the economic crisis. Now let's move to who to lead the NPP. And in there as well, January 2023, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia had 32%, Alan Kojo Tremartin had 41%, and Kennedy Ejiapong had 14%. Now fast forward to April, and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia drops to 29%, Alan Tremartin drops to 30%, but Kennedy Ejiapong is such a sharp rise from 14% to 23%. There again, you would want to wonder what exactly on that score is accounted for this. Let me come to you first, Mr. Dankwa.
I think people are beginning to see him as an option within the MPP, and even indeed across the country as well. He's been saying a lot of stuff to people that he meets, and from our officers in the field, he's been really going to the ground and he's talking a lot. What we've also noticed is that his support is not coming from people who have poor education. He has about 22% of his supporters having the first degree. So it's not a riffraff that are supporting Kennedy Ejiapong. So it's a broad-based coalition he's putting together. And he's kind of eating into Bawumia and Alan bases. Last June, I think July, he started with Bawumia. He cut his lead up to a point. I think he's done with Bawumia. He's now going into Alan. They must figure out how to respond. Otherwise, he will keep rising in the poll.
Reminds me of what we saw with the Nigerian elections. Peter Obi coming from nowhere and challenging the status quo so strongly, making such a phenomenal mark. Are you seeing Kennedy Ejiapong doing same, Dr. Boahen?
Yes, it's unfortunate the media is not giving Kennedy or Ejiapong that needed attention or media coverage. And I think that if the media should follow him, throughout his campaign, as Musa has indicated, you will see. And you see, Musa made an interesting stuff here, indicating that majority of the cohort following him are people with first degree and above, indicating that these are rational voters who have the capacity to even influence, undecided voters. And that makes his campaign very interesting. I mean, I think that he's segmenting right from a political marketing perspective. He's segmenting right. I think that if you have such cohorts behind you, first degree, PhD, and up, you will see that these are people who are influencers, and in marketing perspective, that strategy is a kind of buzz marketing, right? Buzz marketing means you are segmenting opinion leaders who can influence your campaign, and once you succeed in doing that, anything that they put up, any story that they put up, any message that they give to their subordinates and people, within their networks would work for you, all right? And so I am tempted to believe that, like Peter Obi, by 2024, Kennedy Ohene Japan could cause a surprise in the Ghanaian politics. And if it is anything to think about, then probably I think that both Dr. Bawumia and Alan Kwadwo Kyerematen should be thinking of who to choose in terms of their vice presidential candidates.
Interesting. So we just shared some statistics, and then we said that was related to all voters. But even when you come to NPP affiliated voters, it doesn't change much. He still has an increase from the compared to the January 2023 statistics. But let's come to the point of education, because you two referred to that. And I'd like to say it's important that we say that also, so you understand that he doesn't just appeal to educated persons. When it comes to him, people who do not have an educational background, he has his highest support from that group of people who are at about 26%. Now, on who to lead the NPP and what is likely to do to the party, because quite recently we've heard from some persons considered as leaders in the party, some suggesting that it is time for Alan Kwadwo Kyerematen, and some saying that, well, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia may have proven through hard work that he deserves it instead. Now we see Kennedy Japan coming in strongly, inching closer and closer. Let's look at the dynamics for this, for the NPP as a party, and what is likely to do to the party, comparing it to what we see on the other side, which is the NDC. It's quite clear that majority of the support is going towards John Dramani Mahama. What could the seeming cracks, how will it impact the campaign of the NPP going into the 2024 elections, Dr. Wine?
Yeah, so we've realized from research that over the years, demographics, play a major role when it comes to determination of election results. All right, and more particularly when it has to do with age and it has to do with education. And these are two important determinants, of voting outcomes. And so if you see, or probably if you analyze, the data in front of us, obviously you are seeing a dominance in terms of the low, educated as compared to the highest, in education. And so when you look at the junior high school as compared to those without education, you probably will see that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has 30% each, all right? Alan Kwadwo Kyerematen has 32 and 23. Put together, that gives you about 55% as compared to 60% from Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. And a jump, by Kennedy Ohene Japan, to about, 50%. And that is significant. So you see between 60 and 50%, cross differences between the three of them. And to me, it wouldn't take much of a time, to bridge the gap for Kennedy Ohene Japan. That is if his campaign goes very well, with his targets. And so I am tempted to believe that there's that, as I've indicated, there is that correlation between, education and voter outcome. So if any of them is able to make inroads with regards to some of these things, I think that it will be good. But you see that most of Ghanaian voters are the people with low educational background or no educational background. They dominate, our voter segments, and it makes it quite interesting that whoever is able to win majority of that group is likely to make an important determination of the election. And secondly, you will see that majority of kingmakers, that is the swing, as it were. We are having a constant increase in swing voter populations in Ghana. And most of these people are people who would, in any other day, are able to determine, who becomes the president of this country. So you will see them within the highest levels of education, the rational voters. So, all in all, no one can play with these different cohorts in education, right? So, I think that whoever is managing the campaign of these three potential candidates of the MPP has a difficult task, and they should rather be working hard from a political marketing angle, to be able to win not just the swing voter, but also the uneducated and the least educated, in society.
Interesting. What about you, Musa Dankwa? What do you make of these dynamics, and whether or not they're likely to affect the NPP based on the seeming cracks we're seeing compared to the NDC, which appears to be, throwing most of its weight behind John Dramani Mahama?
Okay, if you look at the data at the moment, in the race between Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and John Dramani Mahama, you can see about 13% of MPP voters opting to vote for Dr. John Dramani Mahama. Now, that cracks haven't manifested yet. So if after the campaign, they're unable to bring the party together, that number will go up. And we're going to see this in the Akan areas and also in the northern part of the country. If Alan is the candidate, we expect the Akan areas to be galvanized. And we can see that in Alan numbers against Mahama, that he's racking up to 79% or so in Ashanti region and elsewhere. And then his numbers kind of dropped in the northern regions against Mahama. So we have the north and south divide. Regardless of who is MPP's candidate, this crack will show. And that crack, as to whether the overall impact of the crack will depend on the volume of votes coming from each area.
Right. So for you, it is not what happens before the flag bearer is selected, but after. After,
yes. After. That's very crucial.
That's an interesting point.
That could help them to kind of galvanize their base and rally them around a candidate, or they will just scatter, and that would be a disaster for them.
But don't you believe that there is an impact of how the primaries will be conducted on their ability to come together after, and we're beginning to see people get a bit personal. People begin to go into some kind of politics that we will term as unhealthy. So what for you will be that good way of doing the primaries now, so that once they exit that stage, it will be easier to pull the support base together?
The best way to do it is to avoid arm twisting. If it is open and fair field, people lost fairly, I think it will be much easier for them to come together. But if people are seen to have been kind of arm twisted and then pushed against the wall, I think that unity will be difficult.
Yesterday, Mr. Ikeotu was on Upfront, and he made a statement to suggest that it was time for Alan Tremantin. We've heard this before, where people say that Alan Tremantin, retreated so that Nana Akufo-Addo could become the party's flag bearer. So it would be unfair to him to put up Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia to come and compete so fiercely against him. But there are those who also believe that this is healthy competition and everybody must prove their worth, convince the delegates on why they should be voted for. But over time, we're beginning to see the MPP noted for something. Remember the last elections, what happened in Fomena, which affected them greatly, eventually when that independent candidate had to now cede his allegiance back to the party, and then he was made a deputy speaker. We are beginning to see that again. We're hearing from the camp of the NPP that they have told delegates where they have MPs that the MPs preferably should go unopposed. And so when you see, that came to mind when you used the term arm twisting.
Yes.
And we're seeing all these things play up again, even on that scale. How do you see it playing up on the bigger platform, and whether or not you think it's even possible?
Look, I have a very strong opinion about that. There are some MPs that are not performing, that it will be in the party's interest to let them fall on their swords. If they propel them and then arm twist and protect them, the election 2024 will be disaster for their parliamentary seats. Because when you present a fresh candidate, they have a fresh opportunity to go back to the voters and say, look, I'm different, I'm new, I won't be what this guy was, so give me the chance. Then you put the voter in a very unique situation that, should I give him a chance? But if you impose people on them, the ramification will be quite disaster.
What are your thoughts, Dr. Brahim, on this issue?
Putting up candidates, I think the last time I visited the studio, I mentioned it, right? And I said that you don't just pick a candidate. And another point that I will still hold on to is the fact that the delegates, need to make informed decisions for Ghana, not for themselves, not to enrich themselves. All right. Now, so when you check even the regionals, statistics that Mr. has brought, you will see that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is leading about 8 regions. That is among all voters, right? And Kennedy Ohene Japan is leading 2. And
Alan Tremantin.
Alan Tremantin is leading about 6, all right? It has about 6. So it tells you who is even popular among voters in Ghanaian regions, all right? Now, so if this data is anything to go by, then obviously the first pick of the national voter is Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. All right. Now, you will see that when you look at certain performances and you compare this to other, statistics that Mr. brought, you will see that, for example, the age stuff, you will see that it is a close fight between Alan and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. And we also see that Kennedy Japan is making important inroads. Now, so as the question is, you see, you cannot discount the support base of each of them. And that depending on the unity in the party, if the unity is mild and the MPP management is not able to, control the campaign messages, the insults, the fights, and more importantly, as Mr. put it, arm twisting, someone favoring a candidate and supporting a candidate, as against the other, especially if the party leadership are in the position of doing that. Then, of course, it will be a negative, against who the other candidates, and that is one place that the MPP needs to be careful. And for me, I have followed the campaign of all of them, And as at now, I've not seen any insult coming from any of them. I think that they are all campaigning based on their strengths. They are campaigning and delivering messages based on their vision. And they are also campaigning and giving reasons why, the delegates should vote for them. And I think that it is good for the MPP if they are able to manage this process, because we've seen it in 2008 where insults against one another affected the candidature of President Nana Akufo-Addo. Certain descriptions were put in there which the opposition actually used against Nana Akufo-Addo in 2008. And I think that should not be a repeat. Political parties should be learning to improve, their campaign going forward at any day, any time. So at this point, unity is important, very, very important, and they need to cement that from the word go. And if they are able to do that and build on that unity, I think that it will be a very interesting contest in 2024. I've always said that political parties don't lose elections, but they prepare and hand over to an opposition party. So if it is not deliberate that MPP would want to work its way out to opposition, then of course they need to maintain a very strong unity within their campaign so that they can give the MDC a good fight. Else breaking the eight may remain a doubt.
Beyond who to vote for, a major concern for many voters here in this part of the world is whether or not it will be a free and fair process, whether or not my vote will count, whether or not I would have the opportunity to exercise my right. And I think it's important that you brought the issue of the new constitutional instrument into this particular survey, because here again, you see what a cross-section of Ghanaians want. So support for the new CI for election 2024. And 37% said yes. 50% said no. And 13% had no opinion. Let's start off on the point of those who had no opinion. Why exactly was it that they were apolitical, they were not interested in the politics, or they just couldn't understand the issues to form an opinion?
No, we explained the issue in the questionnaire.
Okay.
We said that EC wants to use the national ID card as the sole document you require to register to vote, and that they are going to remove the other option, which enables somebody to vouch for you, for you to vote to vote without the national ID card. Do you support removal of the guarantor system and use the national ID as the only document required? It was very clear. There was no ambiguity with the question.
Right.
And I think those who are don't have opinion, they do have opinion, but it's not very strong.
Okay.
Remember, there are those who get the EC card previously just as an identity card.
You're right.
Not because they want to vote.
You're right.
Now, NIA card is the sole card for national ID. So, voting card is no longer important for them. And indeed, there are certain religious groups that will not even go for EC card any longer because they don't vote.
Right.
So those are the people that no opinion.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So almost like they're apolitical. But the larger percentage of the people you spoke to said they didn't want this.
No,
they didn't want this. And I just hope that the people who represent them in Parliament know that this is what the people want. Absolutely. Because in any case, it is what the people want that should be given priority.
And we asked a further question, whether if EC succeeds in that CI, will they take the extra journey to go and get the card just to come and register and vote?
Yes. Split
in the middle. 35 said no, they won't. And that's a large number of voters. And we are looking about maybe 1.9 or 2 million first-time voters. And if you take that percentage from that, that's a huge number.
And so does this feed into the argument of the main opposition that you're likely going to disenfranchise many people?
And that data shows, it's proven in the report, yes.
Interesting. Dr. Tutu Boahing, so we're seeing here the statistics showing, would you travel a good distance to obtain the NIA card in order to register to vote? All voters, 42% said no, and unregistered voters, 35% said no. That's almost, like he said, split in there because 35% said yes. Do you agree that this will necessarily translate into disenfranchising people during elections?
I think that, to me, the decision of the voter is more important. And if for a particular reason, as Musa was trying to articulate, that people will obtain certain ID cards for various reasons, right? So the value of the ID cards become more important to the person. So somebody believes that if I have the Ghana card, it is not just for the purposes of voting alone, but for other reasons. The person will see the need to probably travel to get the card. It suggests that the person may own a card, but will not also engage in voting. All right. Some others who believe that it is purposely for voting, and the other additional value, is not that important to me. Then that person will put in more effort to go get the card. And so the decisions are there. But for me, my points with regards to obtaining the national ID card is not so much related to disenfranchising people. But I believe that, you see, Ghanaians need to take decisions for Ghana. And so if it is a fight between the Ghana card and any other identities, with even including our passports, we need to ensure that the legislative instrument is not really biased, the CI is not really biased, all right. But the point still remains that if we are going to be fair and to ensure that we put in appropriate strategies and measures in place, not to get foreigners, to decide for Ghana, that is the most important thing. Because, you see, we have also seen that we have a lot more Nigerians in Ghana and other nationals in Ghana who have access to the Ghana card. So just as some other nationals have access to Ghanaian passports and the voter ID cards, as we are saying, then of course we have traded unnecessarily, our Ghanaian identity for foreign interests, and that will not be good for our electoral process. In other jurisdictions, you cannot go as a foreigner to decide, for those countries in terms of elections. All right. And so I think that it is not the debate about which of them to use, but it is about putting in measures to ensure that these identities documents do not fall into unnecessary hands, where those people can use it to make a determination for Ghanaians. To me, that is where the missing link is, and that is where we need to address the issue. All right. It is not just about voting, and it is not just about owning a card. The debate goes beyond these things. And so I think that our lawmakers in Parliament, and together with the EC and its management, its board, should consider this issue thoroughly and not just push it along partisan lines, to the detriment of the Ghanaian interest. I think that proper narrations, proper debates go into this thing, so that at the end of the day, it will be a blessing for Ghana so that our national anthem, God Bless Our Homeland Ghana, will be a reality.
Shouldn't we then have sought the opinion of Ghanaians before making this move in the CI?
I think that's a lesson for any public institutions. If you're bringing in a major policy, what I know from where I grew up is that you test that policy in the public opinion. There are some CSOs that will help you shape the debate and understand the issues before we begin to put them in a policy. In Ghana here, we never do that. And I think we should take the lesson from this and try and test some of this in opinion poll before we begin to craft legislation to address them.
So we're wrapping up the conversation in about a minute or two. My last question to you, Mr. Musa Dankwa, has to do with the question, can the NPP break the 8? And over 50% say no, both in January and in April 2023. What cues should the NPP be, the NPP and the major opposition, that's the NDC, be picking from these opinions that have been shared?
I think breaking the 8, one thing that they've done well in this round of poll in NPP is that now most of their voters believe they can break the 8. As to what made them feel like that, I don't have the reasons. But the NPP, the NDC, floating voters and the rest of the voting bloc don't believe they will break the 8. So they must convince the other voting blocs to share in the same belief. Otherwise, they will be on their own.
And how does it play out for the main opposition?
I think for them, they have to capitalize on that, what they have as an advantage, keep the ship steady. That's what they have to do, because the numbers are quite favoring them. Now, what we found very strangely this time around is that, in fact, not this time around, it's been consistent for the past 6 months, that the John Mahama is performing far better in the swing regions than the national average, which is highly unusual.
Right.
Usually the races in the swing regions are much tighter than the national average. But in this case, he's performing far better in the swing regions, which is in the central region, in the western region, in the northeast region, and Greater Accra. And in Greater Accra, the numbers are quite bad for the MPP candidates.
Interesting. You have the last word, Dr. Tutu-Buahi, in breaking the 8, the pros and cons, based on the statistic we have now. Over 50% of the people who share the opinion believe that the NPP can't break the 8. What is in there for the NPP and the NDC to learn?
So I think that it is, as Musa has explained, people who believe that the NPP cannot break the 8 are saying that for reasons and for experiences that they are going through. Secondly, it is a tradition, with regards to the 2 terms in office for the 2 major political parties. And again, I also believe that breaking the 8 is strongly dependent on swing voter intentions and decisions. And so if John Dramani Mahama is actually, doing well in swing regions, then of course it is a threat to breaking the 8. Obviously, when you check the statistics in 2016, the parliamentary and the presidential elections, John Dramani Mahama didn't do well in all swing regions. That is the NDC and John Dramani Mahama didn't do well in all swing regions. And that is just a consideration to, signal the MPP that if you are not doing well in swing regions, then that is dangerous. If they don't take pragmatic measures, to forestall some of these cracks, what it means is that you will see another huge gap between the party that will win and the party that will lose.
Thanks for your time this morning. Dr. Tutu-Buahi is a political marketing consultant at the University of Education, Winneba, and Musa Dankwa is Executive Director of Global InfoAnalytics. And we've been discussing Global InfoAnalytics' latest national poll, which saw the president's approval ratings drop, plus all the other things that we've been discussing. If people want to get the full document, how do they access it?
It's on the website.
Okay, globalinfoanalytics.com.
.com.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning here on the AM show. Well, when we return, we will be talking about the World Book Capital, because Ghana, or the city of Accra, has been selected as the 2023 World Book Capital. I'll be back to tell you more about that. Please stay.